Hello, coming to you all the way from the future in Burbank, California. We said we'd be back. It's the sequel episode of the Film versus Film podcast. I am one half of your hosts, Quinn Boys. I have seen over a dozen sequels in my life, and I am joined as always by my co-host and future freedom fighter, Leonard Smith Jr. Leonard?
Great Scott. We made it. We did it, Quinn. We're here. We made it to the sequel episode. Second season finale. Very excited. I'm super excited because
if this podcast hits 88 minutes per episode, we are toast.
Super excited to talk about these movies, talk about sequels. Super excited about the guest we have today. Hilarious man. He's a teacher.
And as we came to believe, he is a person who's very familiar with sequels, intimately familiar with sequels.
Yeah, it was meant to be. You know, it's fate.
I stepped on your intro though, Leonard. I'm going to go back in time and let you do it again. My bad.
You know, he's a teacher. He's a coach. He's funny. He's a writer. He's impacted both of our lives in a very positive way. It's Jake Jabbour.
Oh, that might be the nicest introduction I've ever got. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being on.
No problem. Thanks for joining us, Jake.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
We've been doing this podcast for 2 seasons now. We decide what the seasons are, but basically, Leonard and I will debate films. We will pick a winner each episode this season with the help of a guest. And so this is the second season finale to our second sequel season. I just tongue-tied myself. And we figured no better person to have on the show than someone who comedically at least knows us fairly well. Mm-hmm. I think you know our comedic styles,
yes.
Whatever the best way to say that would be, Jake. And also, we know that you like to talk movies. I mean, can you tell us a little bit when we asked you specifically about this prompt that we'd be discussing sequels today? You mentioned that you have like, are you writing a book about it? Am I giving something away?
You're not.
We can
No.
go back in time and take this
No.
out.
Yeah. I basically I wrote a book a couple years ago, and it's still in the due to quarantine. It was supposed to come out last year, and now it'll come out this year. But a big part of the editing process is it was mostly a memoir, but I tried to shoehorn in a bunch of essays on movies and stuff that I just think is fun. And my editor was like, there's really no place for this. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, what am I going to do while I wait for this to publish? So I was like, well, I'll just write another book. And then I'm taking you through my boring thought process, but it was and I want to make sure that it's just about the stuff that I find interesting or fun. And then I was like, well, it'll be my second book. And so then I'll make the second book about sequels. So trying to expand on that idea, not just for movies, but what it means to do something again. There are your traditional movie sequels, but there's also season 2 of a television show, or writing a second book, or a director's second movie that they made, okay. Right? So Pulp Fiction will be in there because it's Quentin Tarantino's second movie he directed, and often people sort of a lot of this is judging the sequel or the against the original, and it just so happens that the movies you guys picked are movies that I love to talk about anyway. So this has been truly, you're doing me a favor.
Oh, well, actually, you thought it was a favor, but we went back into time and we watched you from your bedroom window, and we watched you for about a good 10 years, and we were like, okay, these are the movies we're going to choose. It's going to be the perfect episode. It's great.
Nice. I apologize for having to watch me through my window.
Yeah, we saw a lot of stuff that we're not going to mention.
But that's funny, you're talking about sequels. You wrote a second book, and we're on the second season of our podcast. Man,
Look at that.
Wow, that's amazing. What do you look for when what is Is there anything that you are like key factors or like when you're watching that you're looking out for when you're watching a sequel?
Well, I think what's so interesting about a sequel is like, it really is a like, it's almost an unnecessary risk. And it's become less of a risk because of like franchises and stuff like that. But like, a key component to storytelling is like, it should feel surprising and inevitable. And for a sequel, you have to do that in such like a specific way, because it has to be mostly inevitable. It mostly has to be the people are coming back to see the same story or the same characters or whatever. So, but it can't be so inevitable that it feels boring or reductive or redundant. But if it's too surprising, then people are like, "This sucks. This isn't what I came to the movie." Like the burden. It is like, and I think franchises have made it like, well, we'll all go see Thor: Dark World, even though we think it's going to be trash, and it is trash. But a sequel is like, you're literally going like, remember that thing you liked? I think I can do it again. It's just like such a heavy gamble. So my kind of theory with it is like, most of the time, sequels that work change one thing and leave almost everything else the same. And sequels that don't work often just change too much. Is kind of like my working.
That's
sort of
funny because my thought, I feel like this was the toughest prompt for me and Quinn to choose movies for, because there are just so many options. And for me, my first thought was The Dark Knight, but I felt like that was a cop-out pick, and I didn't want to choose it. And I wanted to choose something maybe more nostalgic, because that was our original kind of feel when we started the podcast. So one of my choices was Aliens, which is like a completely different movie than the first movie, like 100%.
Yeah.
Like the first one's like a suspenseful kind of like thriller, like slow paced tension.
Sci-fi haunted house movie.
Yeah, exactly. And the second one's just an action movie. But it's wild that they were so successful with it being a different movie. And then the movie I actually ended up choosing is literally just like, we know what you like, we know what you're here for, and oh yeah, at the end of this movie, we're gonna show you a trailer for the third movie. It was crazy. I was like, what is happening right now?
I don't want to step on where we're going at all, but like, I think what's cool about the two movies you guys picked, and this is something that I think about a lot, is like, of the sequels that often get sort of like lumped as being better than the original, a high percentage of them have to do with time travel. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think that it is a way to sort of like put the audience at ease, that like, no matter, like, it allows you to zoom out without having to change much, because we just like lengthen the space of time that we're playing in, so you don't really have to change that much. And it says like, don't worry, that like resolution, that ending you were looking for, we're gonna show you that like it will continue past. Like, I think it like scratches an existential itch of like happily, and they don't always end happily ever after, but like, whatever comes down the line, your characters are going to be able to resolve it in the same way. So I think it's
sticking with me, that thing you said, Jake, where the sequel is like, I'm going to give you the thing you love, but put a slightly different spin on it. But it has to be the same pitch, because otherwise you're going to be like, what? Like, I was reading, full disclosure, I think the first sequel that I thought of, or the first one that people maybe started the idea of like normalizing sequels, and also the idea that the sequel could be better than the original, was probably Godfather Part 2. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's like a big debate, is which is the better Godfather. I'm not going to weigh in on that. right now. I will say that I have not seen The Godfather Part 3, but I was just reading an interesting thing about it because I guess Coppola recut it, and we're not here to talk about trilogies, but just for
That's next season.
it is the sequel to Part 2, but a lot of people were saying I haven't seen it, so I don't know if this is correct or not. But a lot of people's issue with it at the time was like it comes back. First of all, there's been too much time. I do think there's a strike while the iron is hot kind of thing, but it's like Michael Corleone, Al Pacino didn't seem like the same character. And granted, that can happen. People change over however much time is supposed to have taken place between the story and however much time did take place between Godfather Part 2. But like, people were like, this isn't the same. Like, I feel like I'm watching Al Pacino and not this character that I met before the kind of Al Pacino character was codified in like all these 90s movies where it's just a caricature of himself. And I thought that was really interesting, especially because my pick has a similar thing. I guess you could argue about who the main character of the
Go ahead. What's your pick?
movies are, and I'll be coy. But before I get to it, I guess the one thing I wanted to say is, Leonard, we should go into a little bit of bookkeeping. I think we've hinted at what our movies are, and I'll give mine first. But full disclosure, Jake, you catch us for the season finale of our podcast, but you unfortunately have come too late. I'm trying to build a time machine to see if I can go back and reverse this, but I have already lost. We do 9 matchups a season. First to 5 wins the season.
Okay.
The loser has to do something movie related as a punishment. Last season, I won 5-4. It was very tight.
It was rigged.
I made Leonard watch the Green Lantern movie. Green Lantern is Leonard's favorite superhero. He had avoided the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, so I thought it was a fitting punishment. He had to watch and live stream himself watching Green Lantern.
It was awful.
Did you like that movie, by the way, Leonard? What was the result?
Awful. It was so bad.
That's right.
Well, guess what? So yeah, we are.
I'm a man.
We are here. This is where I take
lost.
over, Quinn.
Okay,
Quinn's
go for
already
it.
lost the season. The first season where we had impartial judges every episode, which I feel like is the true inaugural winning of a season. Anyways, I digress. The punishment Quinn is going to have for this season will be...
I haven't learned this yet. I'm learning this for the first time.
Will be stipulated on the results of this. It will be worse if he loses this episode, and it will still be bad if he wins, but it'll be worse. So
you're giving me something to play for. There's no reason that I should just turn my mic off and let you...
So
Jake, you will still have something to choose, and I'm saying now, help me out.
If he...
No, pick
hold
impartially.
on. If he loses, he will have no choice in the movie that he will watch. And when that movie, and if he watches the movie, he'll have to watch is A Fault in Our Stars. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. It's a movie that Quinn has been avoiding for his entire relationship. Fitting that we're recording this on Valentine's Day. Corey will be very happy to hear the news if you lose. You have to watch it. Obviously, you have to record yourself or live stream it in some form, and you have to do at least a 30-second to a minute recap on your IGTV show expressing your love for A Fault in Our Stars.
Wow.
You're hitting me where it hurts. I hate kind of is that a Nicholas Sparks story or whatever that guy's name is? Whatever. I hate those teen falls in love movies, and I hate the subgenre of teens fall in love and one of them is in a hospital. I call it those movies where they're wearing the IV that like goes into your nose or whatever, or maybe it's not an IV, but whatever those things in the hospital where they like put the fluids into your nose. Like there's always one of them is always wearing one, and it's its own genre of teen romance movie where like just one person is sick. God love real life stories of those. I think those are great. I don't want to watch a weepy movie about it. So this sucks. So what am I?
That's if you lose.
I can change it if I win today?
That's if you lose.
That's if I lose.
If you win, you have an option of 3 movies to watch. And you will still have to live stream it, whatever, record it. You don't have to do a segment on the TV show. But the 3 movies are A Walk to Remember, Twilight.
Same thing.
Twilight. Yeah, Twilight. Or A House of Sand and Fog.
So you're saying I have to watch...
You have to watch one of those 3.
I have to watch The Fault in Our Stars.
Where did A House of Sand and Fog come from?
It's fucking depressing. It's a depressing ass movie.
It came out of the fog.
Do you know about that movie, Jake? Do you know about The House of...
I feel like I do, But based on the other ones, like if you had been like A Fault in Our Stars, Twilight, or Jake, what do you think the third one is going to be? I would have said like that, A Walk to Remember something. A House of Sand and Fog feels like I either don't know what it's about, or that is just like you can watch one of these sappy romances or be super
Exactly.
depressed.
That's what it is. That's what it is. You either have to watch what you truly don't want to watch, or you have to watch this depressing ass fucking movie.
Holy
I feel
shit.
like Leonard's trying to get me to kill myself. I'm
Choose love, Quinn.
Reformed,
Choose love. Choose love.
I'm gonna remove all suspense and just read the Wikipedia summary of The House of Sand and Fog from 2003. Reformed drug addict Kathy Niccolo has her California coast house, which she inherited from her father, taken away by the country due to a misunderstanding about back taxes. Actually, this sounds delightful. I don't know. This doesn't sound that bad. The place is bought by Iranian immigrant Masoud Amir Berani, who tends to fix it up and sell it in order to provide a better life for his wife and son. All right. Well, I don't know. That doesn't sound so bad. I don't want to watch any of those
don't read
movies,
anymore
though,
because I don't want you to ruin it.
All right.
But if you do choose that one, I know I can talk about it because I've seen it and I know what happens. The other two I won't watch, but you're gonna have to watch.
So
That
if I
is
win,
really
I
funny.
don't have to watch Fault in Our Stars, and I can pick one of those three.
But if you lose, you have to watch
Okay.
A Fault in Our Stars. But if you win, you don't have to watch
Okay.
So if you win, you don't have to watch A Fault in Our Stars.
I can still kick a. So yeah, my girlfriend wanted to see A Fault in Our Stars a while ago, and she's like, "Can we go see this movie?" And I just said, "No, no, I don't want to see that movie." And it's been not a contentious sticking point, but it's been a sticking point, and I'm dug in. So this would be a little bit like my Green Lantern.
Well, I will, for the sake of a podcast I don't quite understand the rules about, I will maintain integrity and say I will not make a choice based on the consequence I would prefer for Quinn.
Thank you. That's all.
okay.
I ask.
Well, feel free to waver on that, Jake, but I don't think I'll need it because my pick, we can finally get to it, is the best sequel. It's the best sequel of the two selections we have this week, and I think I can make some real strong arguments that it's the best sequel of all time. I am talking about 2 weeks in a row. He failed me last week, but I'm going with Jim Cameron again. The 1991 future science fiction thriller action film Terminator 2, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Edward Furlong, and of course, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget. This is
Linda
bad.
Hamilton?
Linda Hamilton. I was thinking Sarah. I couldn't get Sarah Connor out of my head.
No one
Linda
can.
Hamilton, reprising her role from the first, as is Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is it's your classic robot from the future tries to kill savior of the past in the present story. And it is, like Jake said, and like I would agree, it is the same premise as the first Terminator, which, if anyone hasn't seen, is kind of like a weird sci-fi take on the 80s slasher fic. Arnold is essentially the Michael Myers or the Jason Voorhees of the series. He's just unkillable, this time because he's a robot from the future, not some kind of mystical boogeyman, but he's an unkillable monster who tracks down Sarah Connor and tries to kill her before she can give birth to the man who will ultimately save humanity in the future in the war against the robots. This time, Arnold is back, but there's an interesting twist. He's the good guy, and I think that is the secret sauce that makes this sequel so good. By this point, Arnold was in a different point of his career. He had kind of added a little bit of charm and a little bit of hero. He'd been fighting the Predator. He was less the villain. You see this big, beefy guy, and you're like, he's the villain. But it allowed him to keep the robotic acting, and I mean that as a compliment, that he's so good at, and gave him a little bit of depth where he has a young boy who teaches him cool 90s slang. But also he's able to still do the Terminator things that we love while also being a character that we can root for this time. It's a very simple change. Linda Hamilton's character has changed a lot as well. Sarah Connor has been hardened in the years since the first movie. She's kind of a classic damsel in distress in the first one. Now she's kind of an action hero of her own. She's got a kid that she's looking out for. And this movie is just, it's great. Leonard was getting on me for picking Titanic for a totally different prompt last week. I know Leonard doesn't have a problem with Terminator 2. I'll say really quickly before I cede to you, Leonard, to introduce your movie. I also thought about The Dark Knight, and I'll come back to this idea probably in my closing argument, but I didn't. and I didn't pick The Dark Knight, even though that might be, considering when I grew up and where I was at the time when I saw The Dark Knight, and I just saw that movie in theaters like a bunch, as did every guy my age. But it's like, that's a great film, and that is a better sequel, I think, than Batman Begins. But if you call the first movie Batman Begins, it's very clear that you're planning to have a sequel. The thing that I like about this movie is I don't think people that went to see The Terminator, especially because the whole premise is we got one window here to send these guys back. I don't think people that went to see The Terminator thought that in 7 years' time, however much time was between these sequels, they'd be sitting down in the theater again to see another one. Part of, for me, the fun of a sequel is the truly great sequels. Obviously, they're superhero movies now, you expect them. But the truly great sequels is like, I didn't know I was going to get this, and you made it better? Like, that's a very rewarding cinema experience where you're like, shit, man, I love the first one, and then you kind of blew the doors off the second time around. You made it bigger, but you didn't make it dumber, and you didn't make it worse somehow by expanding all of its parts. And I think Terminator 2 is the example of superior sequel. That's
Okay.
my
I
opening
think
statement.
the way you just ended your opening statements right there can be said about my choice as well, which is Back to the Future Part 2. I feel like they missed out on an opportunity to, I mean, I guess we got lazy in our times where they could have just put Back to the Future, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, I don't know if Back to the Future, it feels like they maybe thought it was going to be a standalone movie. You know, it took a long time for Zemeckis and the other fellow who wrote it to get this movie,
Bob Gale.
Yeah, picked up. And originally Michael J. Fox wasn't cast in this movie. It was someone else, and they were like, "You are not right for this." And they had to.
They shot most of it.
They had to spend $4 million to reshoot like a good amount of scenes.
You're talking about the original with Eric
The
Stoltz,
original,
right?
yeah,
Or
that's
are you
what I'm
saying
saying.
that he wasn't cast
I was just
in the
thinking of the
sequel?
point.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
They went back to Stoltz for the sequel. I swear, Eric, we're not going to do what we did last time.
Well, what's funny about this prompt is
We'd have to be real big jerks to take this movie away from you twice.
well, what's funny about this prompt is like it's not just really a prompt on the second movie. It's kind of on 4 movies. It's on the first movie and the second movie for both because you have to have something to compare it to originally. And I don't know if Back to the Future, I don't think was sought out as like, oh, this is going to be a franchise. Obviously, after the first one, they're like, we're going to make 2 more. Like they knew they were going to try to capitalize off of the opportunity. But with this one, it's just we know what you want. We know what you're here for, and we're going to give it to you again. In the first Back to the Future, Marty McFly, he is living with his family who his parents suck. His mom's overweight, alcoholic. His dad is just a loser. His brother and sister are both losers. They're not successful in their careers. He's the youngest child in the family.
They're buttheads,
They're
Leonard.
buttheads. They're just like, it's kind of like in the 80s it was like, you know, all in All in the Family? Not All in the Family, but what is it, the Bundys?
Family Ties.
What's the Bundys?
Michael J. Fox, Family Ties. Oh, that is
Married with Children?
Married with
I feel
Children.
like that was the time where it's like, hey, it's cool for families to actually be portrayed as what they are, and that's shitty most of the time. And he had a shitty family, and I can't originally remember why he goes back in time in the first one. I know he goes back to like fix like his parents' marriage.
He's just trying to escape from terrorists.
Oh, that's right. The Iranian terrorist that he gets the plutonium for the car. Doc Brown gets he
murdered
just
in
meets
front
Doc
of him.
Brown for the first time in the parking lot. I forgot.
It is insane.
Yeah, it is an insane way to start the movie because you would think that him and Doc, like, he grew up knowing Doc. But it's like, no, I just met this dude in a parking lot, and he got murdered.
No, he did grow up knowing
No.
him, didn't he? Jake, can you mediate here? That's not the first time you met Doc Brown.
I don't think it's the first time he met
But they
him.
weren't, like, family. They weren't.
I always appreciated how those movies never felt the need to explain why Doc and Marty were friends. Like, because, no, if I recall, like, it's like Marty played by Michael J. Fox, obviously, not Eric Stoltz. Marty's, like, playing his guitar on the amps, and then it blows out, and he gets a message from Doc, like, meet me at the mall parking lot, and he does, and then the Serbians?
they're
I don't know who
Iranians,
shows
I think.
up, but they're
I
like...
can't remember. Maybe you just said
Okay.
Iranian, so I'm thinking that.
But it's like Marty doesn't seem particularly smart or gifted at STEM. It's weird that Doc feels the need to keep Marty around. Like, they have this friendship that I don't think is ever really explained. But it's a tight bond.
But he ends up going back into time, and then he doesn't have enough plutonium to get back, so he goes, talks to the Doc in the 50s. They need a certain amount of electricity, so they use a lightning strike. They know there's going to be this big storm that hits the clock tower on a certain night, so that's his plan. But him going back, he affects his future life, because then his parents don't meet, because his mom meets him in the past and becomes infatuated with him, falls in love. Whole thing happens. He fixes everything, goes back to the future, and as soon as he gets back, motherfucking Doc, he's not even back. He's back for like 30 seconds, like a minute, and then Doc comes.
Yeah, he doesn't have time to change his clothes.
Doc comes.
Yeah.
Take a shower.
Like, this isn't an interesting week for Marty McFly. Like, he's gone back and forth in time, and a few times. But so he goes back. He goes to the future this time, which is funny because the first one's called Back to the Future, but they don't. I guess it's Back to the Future because they're in the past. But this time they actually go to the future.
They do finally pay off the title in the second movie, which is interesting, because I think people would always sarcastically say that about the first one, like, oh, it's called Back to the Future, but you're going to the past. And it's like, all right, we'll show you the future.
Which was super cool at the time. Like, this movie came out in 1984, and a couple years before I was born, and I feel like if you just grew up in the 80s or in the 90s, you loved this film. Every kid, no matter when you were born in the 80s or 90s, you just grew up on Back to the Future. I feel like everyone loves it. I feel like it's regarded as the better film of the three. And in this one, he goes to the future, fucks things up, tries to save his children, and then Biff gets the almanac, man. Every person's dream. Get that almanac, win money on betting, and Biff goes back into the past, alters the future where he becomes Trump, basically, and has his own casino, and marries Marty's mom, and Doc becomes committed. His father gets killed, so they have to go back into the past again, which is cool because it's like, all right, you get to see all the old things you loved from the first movie, and now there's 3 Marty McFlys, 3 Docs, and 2 Docs, and so it's just amplified. They're like, how can we heighten this? And they heighten the fuck out of it, and it's great. They do a great job.
It's meta before meta was like a thing. It was interesting rewatching it. Jake, what are your thoughts on these movies?
Well, I think it's interesting neither of you picked The Dark Knight because you would have got automatic points for Gary Oldman being in it, right? That would have immediately got
I
points.
thought about that.
I didn't think about it.
Another season where the person we pick is not in any of our movies.
But yeah, I think, man, I don't even know where to start, and I'm trying to keep it brief. But I will say that, like, they both do what sequels do well, which is they tell the exact same story. Like, more than a third of Back to the Future Part 2 is the exact same story, just told from a different camera angle. Like, it's not a better story, I don't think. Like, the lesson isn't better. Like, the lesson in the first one is, like, about courage and bravery, and there's also kind of, like, this weird thing about hooking up with your mom. Like, that is so compelling. And the sequel one is, like... The sequel is like, well, we learned that illegal gambling is bad. Like, it is, like, such lower stakes. But it's, like, so much more fun. You get to go to the future. So they, like, tell the exact same story and just, like, show us new worlds. And then Terminator 2, by doing time travel, it allowed James Cameron to do something that would be otherwise impossible from a storytelling perspective. Like, until Breaking Bad comes along 20 years later and does it over the course of 6 seasons. But by doing time travel and robots, James Cameron is allowed to take the villain and make him the hero in the second movie. Like, without... Like, when you were talking about people being like, oh, it didn't feel like the same Michael Corleone. James Cameron literally took the villain and was like, he's a good guy now. And he did it not for storytelling purposes, but because Arnold was like, I'm about to be a megastar. I don't want to be the villain anymore. So they had to be like, okay, I guess you could get reprogrammed to be like a good guy. And he took Linda Hamilton, who you said is like a damsel in the first one, and just a straight up fucking knight, like badass in the second one. Like, he like recast his characters and then told the same exact story. And then he was like, we'll send a robot back in time who will chase somebody named Connor, and and then the woman will melt the robot. Like, they're legit the same story. And what I think is like so cool about both of these movies is like, and this is, I guess, my question to you guys, and maybe you're getting into this, but I wasn't totally clear on if you guys were saying, like, of all the sequels, these two are the best, or if you were saying these two are the best, are sequels that are better than the original. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's a totally fair question to ask, and it is up for debate. I think we always, even in these sort of more general prompts, in fact, the more general they can be, the more leeway you have for how to interpret them. So ultimately, Jake, that will come down to your interpretation, and that's just based on whoever makes a stronger argument or whatever you feel more strongly about. I interpreted this as what is the best sequel, and to me, I already talked about it a little bit. You need to kind of change the formula enough in an interesting way to make it worthwhile. But I was thinking also that the best sequel is probably better than its original, because isn't that kind of one of the fun, and Leonard can disagree on that, and it's not like we agreed on that before, but isn't that one of the things, like the fun debates, like what sequels are better than the original? We already talked about Godfather Part 2. I think you could throw Empire Strikes Back into that conversation. And people can disagree about both of those, but I think those are commonly listed amongst like what sequels are better than the original. But there's an argument to be made that, a sequel can just be fun and silly and maybe doesn't have all the gravity of the original, but has some of the more fun, lighthearted, like, this is an interesting place to take this story. So I'm open to that interpretation as well. But yeah, it could be either, is in short.
It's up to you, man. That we really just come in, and I think it's just us being lazy. We're just like, here's the prompt, and you decide how you feel about it. We'll make our arguments.
Where's the fun
obviously.
If we're just going to say it has to be better than the original, it has to be X, Y, Z,
well,
then we can just make a checklist, but...
Because as it sort of stands right now, like... And I think I even asked you guys the question wrong, but like, as it stands right now in my head, I see currently one being a better movie, but the other being a better sequel.
That's funny because I feel like, that's basically the way my argument is going, and I feel like I'm going to guess you think Terminator 2 is a better movie and that Back to the Future 2 is a better sequel? Oh, no, wait. Yes. Yeah, that's what yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Terminator 2 is a better movie. I mean, it's just so fucking good, man. This is like, I'm not a big action movie guy, but I always loved this movie as a kid. Arnold just delivering those like robotic one-liners is just like gold. It's just great. And
your foster parents are dead, or whatever he tells him.
Well, oh man, I could talk about that. Like, I actually think it's a goofy ass movie, and I love it with all my heart. And like, I used to watch it like on repeat as a kid. Like, I would come home from school and watch Terminator 2, and I would stop it before the end because I would cry at the end of that movie. Like, and I don't think that makes for a good movie. Like, I don't think an R-rated action movie should make an 8-year-old cry, like, emotionally. Like, I don't think that's, like, that's not how you, like, frame a good movie. It's like, this hyper-violent sci-fi action blockbuster makes an 8-year-old, like, weep with emotion. So I think it's a goofy-ass movie. Like, there are so many parts of that movie that are like, man, you have me sold on the dumbest, like, silliest, like, John Connor tests the Terminator by being like, you have to do what I say. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, stand on one foot. And he does it. And he's like, okay, that's all the proof I need. And it's like, if I was going to lie to a kid about like, I'll do whatever you say, that's the easiest way to prove it. Like, John Connor's not like rip your arm off or something. Like that would prove that you have to do what I say, but he's just like, he stood on one foot. Like, I guess I get it. Like, and that is like one of a 1,000 things about that movie that I think are just so goofy. So like, I do think I think I enjoy it more as a movie, but I think Back to the Future is like kind of a smarter, like, maybe like better movie, although I don't go back to it as much. Like I don't have as much fun with it. The one thing I'll say about both of them is like, and I've said this about Terminator 2, and then I rewatched Back to the Future Part 2, is like, the special effects hold up pretty well for both of those movies. Like, Terminator 2 better, I think. Like, I don't know how they fucking...
The liquid metal.
The liquid metal still is like, this pretty much works. But even like, there's like a couple moments in Back to the Future too, like when he's talking to him, when Biff is talking to himself in the car or whatever, and they've got him like split by the thing. And at one point he like throws the almanac and it looks like fucking weird. Yes. But other than that, it like looks, I'm like, they did this pretty well. Like, and I was like, oh, that 3D Jaws is going to look stupid, but it didn't look as bad as I was anticipating it to look. And then they even call it out and sort of go like, it still looks fake. Like,
yeah, little cartoony, but felt like by design. If I can come after the effects of Back to the Future Part 2, it's also the original, and maybe the third one, I don't remember. But I'm going to take issue with the practical effects. I hate Old Man Biff. I hate the makeup to try to make a 30-year-old man look 80 or 90. No, they're only going 30 years in the future. But it's like, I get so... It's like you just put that gradation where everyone looks like they have cobwebs on their face, but they don't actually look older. And there's a moment in Back to the Future 2 where they get to the future, and Marty, Doc tells Marty, he goes, hope you don't mind, I had a couple enhancements done, which is funny because in the future you can probably take care... Well, actually, we've lived through 2015, which is the stated future of this movie. And flying cars do not exist, unfortunately, but or self-lacing sneakers.
Or hoverboards.
But like Doc rips a face peel off, which is a thing that we have today. But it's like, he's like, now I look young again. And I'm like, oh, because this is supposed to be Doc from the future. Like, it took me a second. I'm like, the makeup a little bit takes me out of it. The fact that it's like always Biff and it's always Marty, I get it. It's like, it's the same kind of story. I do wish that they got a little bit away from it. And also my take with this movie is I only always remember the future parts of this movie, which is really just the first third. That's the interesting part. That's the promise given to you in the sequel. We're going to actually show you the future. And I do find it kind of, well, it's a great movie. And both of these movies just go, by the way. They just start and then they just go. Like, I don't even know if you were to break down the 3-act structure of the Terminator, like they realize they got to blow up the thing like an hour and 10 minutes into the movie, which is not a problem for me. But Back to the Future Part 2, it's the same issue. It's like, so then, okay, you go to the future. That's so cool. And they set it up like, you got to help your son. And then Marty, you do something bad in the future and you ruin your future. And it's like, we never really pay that off. I find that actually disappointing. I forgot because there's something about like Marty injures his hand and he's going to do, maybe that's in the third one, which I'll get to that too. But then they go back to the present, which is 85, and everything's bad, and that's fun. And then they go back to the 50s, which is back to the first movie, essentially. And that is cool and kind of meta, but to me loses its urgency when it's just referencing off of itself. Like, hey, remember this classic movie? And I always found that a little bit like, bummer. I kind of wish they'd fulfilled the promise of like, it's your kids, Marty. We got to help your kids, which is the cliffhanger of the first movie. And he does, but they just get it away very quickly.
Yeah, but them going back to the past gives you everything you wanted and what you're there for, you know? Like, I wanted the future. I
don't think I did want them to go back to the past. I certainly didn't want them to go to the West, but we're not talking about the
As far as the second goes, I feel like this is the best sequel because it's fucking made for the people. They were like, you love this. This is what the fuck you want. We're going to give it to you tenfold, and it's going to be fun. It's going to just be silly. We're going to fucking keep referencing everything from the old one. I feel like the reason why maybe this one isn't like a great rewatch, well, it probably is because everybody's watched the first one and the second one so many fucking times that we know. But it's like in the movie, they're like, oh, remember that old homeless guy remember that one tertiary character that was someone else in this one? Remember, look at him now. And it's like, okay, I don't know if I necessarily remember Squiggles or whatever the fuck his name was or like, but if you're watching this movie in the movie theater in like 1989 or whenever it came out, you're like, oh shit, holy shit, oh my God, it's that guy. So I feel like you can't go to this other angle and follow Marty and what happened with his hand and the Rolls Royce and he's not a star. We don't care about that shit. We don't want to know. We don't care about the narrative. We want to see time traveling, trying to fix problems, and Marty avoiding other Martys. And we want to see somebody call Marty a chicken and him to do something completely irrational because of that.
There's plenty of that. Why does chicken set Marty McFly off so much? I want to know why he's friends with Doc, and I want to know why he flies into a rage every time someone calls him. I feel like you sound like me right now watching these movies. You're like, I want to know what's up to this, and it's like, no, that's not what this is about at all. It's just such a that's a thing that people in the 50s, where Marty is not from, would be upset about. Chicken. Like, I understand that as maybe a little bit more of a, like, you've insulted my honor, sir. But in 85, no one gave a shit if you called him a chicken. Because his dad was such a coward. His dad was just such a coward that he just didn't want to be that. So, I mean. Can we talk about Michael J. Fox for a second, though? I just feel like it deserves a shout out. If they could synthesize whatever it is that makes Michael J. Fox and by turn Marty McFly so fucking cool. Like, I don't know what it is. He's just like got like bottomless charisma. I would watch him do anything. I even liked him as a girl when he plays his own daughter. I didn't realize that was him until amazing. I was watching Michael the credits. J. Fox is what? These movies don't work without Michael J. Fox. I
didn't know it was him either, and I was like,
I did not.
I know. I was like,
you guys, neither of you knew that was clearly a girl Michael J. Fox. Didn't.
No, I was like reading up on the movie and then was like, oh, because I was like, I mean, I'm a moron, but I was like, who's that? Like, I was like, what's she been in? And then I was like, oh, man.
She's cute.
Oh, good looking. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the movie, I mean, both of these movies don't work without the casting, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true of Terminator 2 as well. Although they do a great job introducing the, was it the T-1000 this time? Played by
Robert Patrick.
Robert Patrick, who is amazing.
So good.
They're just...
He's still what I think about when I think about like a cop, like a dick cop, too. Like the haircut, the look, like it's just perfect.
My issue with Terminator was, it's about time travel and robots sending some of the things back. And it was just like, some of the things... I felt like didn't really make sense. And it was like, all right, if you have this technology and you have this and you know this, some of the logic doesn't make sense. And I was watching. I also just thought it was really stupid. Just how you were saying, like, making an 8-year-old boy cry. It's like, why is this scene in the movie? It doesn't make sense. You're Skynet. You make robots that are the smartest fucking things in the world. And this 10-year-old boy has to explain to you what crying is. What are these? What is that falling from your eyes? What? You don't know what crying is? You're a humanoid robot.
He's not C-3PO. He's a killbot that's been hacked. He's not. He doesn't have like understanding of all these languages and stuff. He just knows enough what he needs to kill you.
I just wish they would have gotten the whole timeline down better, and they like just stuck with their guns from what they said in the first one. You're telling me that John Connor's a 10-year-old boy in this movie, riding around on dirt bikes, breaking into ATMs, remembering times when he was in Bolivia with his mom, training with some general or some army militia dude, but she's also been in jail for like 8 months, 10 months. How the fuck does he remember all this shit? And how the fuck is he's 10 years... When I realized that he was 10 years old in this movie, it kind of took me out of the movie. It kind of fucked up.
10-year-olds, what's your beef? 10-year-olds remember stuff. What's the issue?
But 10-year-olds are living with a foster parent and then riding and fixing dirt bikes and breaking into ATMs, and I just wish he was like 13. He also didn't look like he was 10. they tried to make the timeline fit for like 1997 is the date, and this is the year, and it was just like,
Yeah, you know who else didn't look like he was a young kid? Michael J. Fox
Okay,
playing his
I'm
own
not
son.
yes.
You didn't come at
I'm
me
not
for
coming at
this.
you for that, but I'm just saying, it just didn't feel as believable. Some of the like him being like the way he is. Yes, he's a 10-year-old boy, but it's like, really, this is a 10-year-old doing all this? I don't know. That's just my beef.
The worst part of this movie is Edward Furlong. I mean, the character of John Connor is cool, but the whole like, you know, hasta la vista, baby, and like, you know, I don't love that stuff either. I don't think it really hurts the movie, but I agree.
I think something interesting is like, and I just read this on IMDb, so who knows, but originally, like, Back to the Future was not supposed to have a sequel. Like, they just threw that in to be like fun, right? And but it sort of sets up the idea that like and then Terminator, by doing a sequel, you basically erase the stakes from the previous movie and this movie and any future movie, because you basically go like, yeah, we stopped them this time, but they're just going to keep sending robots to the past. So it like undoes the stakes. So what's weird about these two sequels is like both of them, like Back to the Future Part 2 set up the idea that like you have to keep like rewriting history and the future to sort of like make life like middle class for Marty McFly's family. But they had no intentions of doing it. And Terminator 2 was like, if we do a sequel, we basically undermine the stakes of any of this. So they both like did these movies that they didn't have to do, and they did them so much better than they needed to be. I just think they're both so cool, but they're the weirdest kind of swings. Like the first 5, if you watch Terminator, if you watch these two movies, like Back to the Future and Back to the Future Part 2 back to back, and then you do it with Terminator and Terminator 2, Back to the Future does a cool thing where it's like, right where we left off, here we go. And Terminator 2 goes, remember that tiny movie I spent $80,000 to make or whatever? We're going to blow that budget in 3 minutes, showing robots with laser guns walking out of the ocean and crushing skulls. Like, it is such a kick in the dick to be like, this is the next installment? Like, it is such a big, like, James Cameron just being like, check me out now. Like, and Arnold isn't even in it yet. Like, he's not in it for 10 minutes, and they spend more in those 10 minutes than the entire first movie. Like, it is so crazy. Like, I think they're just both... Everything about them feels like it shouldn't work, and it works so well. And I think it comes down to the idea that, like, they both just went, like, we'll just tell the same story again. Like, it's going to be, like, a bunch of bells and whistles, but, like, literally the same story again.
Yeah, and I think that's, to your point, Jake, I think that is kind of why I gravitate. And, you know, it's a little bit of what Leonard was talking about with Aliens. The first Terminator is not an action movie. I guess I would understand people calling it that because, you know, shit blows up and there's chases. But it's not an action movie in the way that this one is. I mean, just like the first 20, 30 minutes of this movie, there's that, I live in Los Angeles and I'm forgetting what it's called. Like the ravine, or not the, you know,
LA River?
Yeah, where they're like driving the truck after the motorcycle in the LA River. That's like one of the best constructed action scenes that I can recall. Like that still is amazing.
It's so cool.
And the first movie is not really an action movie at all. Like, yes, he's chasing them, but it's just him walking down the street or walking through a nightclub or walking into the police station. This is like, okay, she's on or it's Edward Furlong at this point. It's not yet Sarah Connor. It's like she's on a motorcycle, and then like the other Terminator is driving the truck, and he's gonna grab him to bring him off the motorcycle before like. There's so much more here, and they really did. They blew the doors off the sequel. Back to the Future was already a relatively big budget movie. They were just giving you different, they went a little bit deeper into the time travel mythology. Terminator, you're absolutely right. They're like, don't think about it. I know we told you could only go back once. There was a second window. We're trying it again. And that's, I think, the reason none of the Terminator sequels after this one are worth your time or are good or work. And every few years they try to reboot it. And it sucks. And I don't think they maybe they'll try a different take or something, but they should never try to reboot Back to the Future because it won't. It's equally ridiculous, but it just works because of the casting and the whatever. Like I agree. Like both of them, when they fired their shot with these sequels, even though others came later, it was like, we're going to blow our load this time. And I think that's why they're so good, is because if parts 3, 4, 5, and 6 were just as good, I think it's harder to argue that this was the best sequel. This is just one in a chain. There's a reason we didn't pick like Fast Furious 5 because they do it every few years now.
Yeah. Both of these movies were hugely popular, and that's why they got remade. Well, I don't know if Terminator was hugely as popular as Back to the Future.
No, the first one was like James Cameron had just upped his game a few bits making other sequels, and he's like, you want to do this one again? He's like, yeah, I can blow this out.
Well, I feel like we always have some talking points, as far as deciding which one's the best sequel, and the first one was pop culture, and both of these are heavyweights. This is a heavyweight bout as far as pop culture goes for both of these. I mean, when you think of Terminator, you think of I'll Be Back, Hasta La Vista, baby. When you think of
Come With Me If You Want to Live.
If you think about, Back to the Future, you think of Great Scott and Chicken and
Where We're Going, We Don't Need Roads.
Exactly. Where We're Going, We Don't Need Roads.
Can I butt into just kind of counter argument here, Leonard? Everything you've mentioned from Terminator is specific to Terminator 2. The pop culture that you just mentioned from Back to the Future is from the original. So I'm gonna
Where We're Going, We Don't Need Roads is from the second one.
I think that's at the beginning. Is that not at the end of the first movie?
Is it? Maybe. God damn it.
I'll look it up.
It might be.
I don't know.
Hey, listen.
I think of Back to the Future as the hoverboard. The second one, I think of the hoverboard. I think of the self-lacing sneakers, and I think of
the Cubs winning. The Cubs winning.
I don't
the
think
World
Back
Series.
to the Future.
Cubs winning the World Series.
Sharks
Jaws 19.
It's really that 15-minute window where he's actually in the future.
Those are the biggest pop culture moments for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
hey Chuck, I think I found that sound you're looking for.
That's the first one.
Oh, that is the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes to call him in the second one, but he doesn't say the line.
Original.
He doesn't say the line in the second one.
You see him
he's
call.
like going to the phone.
Which again is the movie trading off its own pop cultural
exactly. So it's basically one and the same. You can't have Back to the Future 1. I mean, Back to the Future 2 without Back to the Future 1. Like Jake said earlier, half the goddamn movie of Back to the Future 1 is in Back to the Future 2. You know what I'm saying? So
okay, I'm just saying your argument is that the pop culture is more strong. Everything you've mentioned is from the first one.
Yes, but you go out and ask somebody on the
all.
street that, and they're not going to know that. They're going to think of Back to the Future 2. They're going to think about they're going to lump it all in the same thing. So I think it all fits into the same category.
Well, you should think that because you want your movie to win, but I need my movie to win. And I'm going to say that everything that I've mentioned is from Terminator 2.
We're just talking about pop culture right now, So
even like the little thumb going into the magma that makes Jake cry every time, that's Terminator 2. Sarah Connor just like bawling out and like, doing those jacked push-ups and like escaping from the thing. When she sees the Terminator, she has the flashback. Like, yes, obviously it's trading off of what you know from the first one, but the imprint pop cultural moments are from T2. I think it wins the category, but I'm happy to toss it to Jake. I don't think it wins the category
because literally my roommate just got, like 2 days ago, a Conan O'Brien Popco figure of him dressed as Marty McFly with the fucking sneakers on the hoverboard. The sneakers, people, do you know how much those sneakers cost right now? If you wanted a pair of those sneakers, they made those sneakers. Yeah. Those sneakers are one of the hottest pairs of shoes in all of the shoe game ever.
Okay. And when the guy at Foot Locker doesn't have the sneakers and says, we'll have them next week, and the kid behind the counter goes, okay, I'll be back. He's referencing Terminator 2.
The kid does not say I'll be back.
Is everywhere.
Maybe in the 90s he'd say I'll be back, but he wouldn't say it in 2021.
People are saying I'll be back and they don't even know what it's from, but that doesn't matter. It's become part of our
if they don't know what it's
dialogue.
From,
it's become part of what people say.
If you're going to argue that it's from the first one and not from the second one, and they say I'll be back and they don't even know what it's from, then
well, I'll be back is from the first one.
Oh, that's a good point. I'll be back is what he says in the police station. You're absolutely right.
You're right.
Hasta la vista, baby, is the exact same thing, and that's from the second one.
That does not hold the same weight.
It doesn't hold the same weight?
No, it does not. I feel like this is a draw. I feel like both. I'm not even going to declare mine a winner over yours.
I'm not going to. I've lost too many to you, Leonard. I'm not going to give you a draw on this one. Jake, what do you think? Yeah.
Which has a bigger pop culture influence?
Which we cannot possibly quantify. We can only make our arguments. Jake is stressing about.
Oh, man. I mean, I feel like you guys touched on, like, and maybe I'm misinterpreting pop culture, but it's like they both
what
have...
resonates more today, I guess, is a other way to think about it. Or
Well,
what was bigger at the time.
They both have rides at Universal Studios. I think Back to the Future, though, is the only one that is still there, right? Like the... I don't know, like... But the phrase Terminator is like... And liquid metal are things that, like, don't exist outside of the world. Like, but you have Rick and Morty, which is basically a parody on... it was conceived as a Back to the Future thing. In terms of, like... But if I see that the red glowing eye, I know Terminator, but like Halloween costumes, I feel like Marty is like fuck, I don't know.
It's a draw.
Which is a bigger pop culture influence. But Back to the Future has not been tinkered with, and Terminator they did the Sarah Connor Chronicles,
right,
amongst all the movies,
right. Also, the Back to the Future ride is closed.
It is.
I will say this.
I just googled it, unless there's multiple, but yeah,
like
one closed in 2007.
The last Back to the Future of the franchise came out in 1990. Terminator has had so many more sequels. They've had shows, blah 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 blah. But the fact that it has that keeps it in the pop cultural eye, and people are still a little focused on it. Back to the Future doesn't have that, and it still is a huge thing, and people still know about it and talk about it and today. So,
well, if you're going to tell me that people don't know what they're saying when they say "I'll be back" or "Hasta la vista," I bet you that if you were to sample a bunch of Gen Zers and ask them if Rick and Morty is based on something, a lot of them don't know what that's based on.
You might be right. You could be right about that.
So if we're knocking people not understanding what they're saying, I mean, I don't think. And I think the fact that they continue trying to make Terminator movies is a residue of how culturally significant it was.
Like I said, I think it's a wash.
Well,
if Jake, if you agree it's a wash, we're not going to pull teeth. Obviously, we can move on. But I just think
none of these talking points hold any weight. These don't hold any weight, so it doesn't truly matter.
Yeah, this one's... I don't know. I mean, Christopher Lloyd did do Doc for like DirecTV ads.
All right, that puts it over the
top. What's our how well? Let's just go ahead and go. How well does it hold up? How well do these movies hold up?
Terminator 2 wins again.
You think so?
Yep. I think the effects are better. I think the action stuff holds up. And I think the fact that we haven't reached and passed 2015, I'm not knocking the movie. Obviously, wherever they were, it wasn't going to have flying cars. But watching it today, I was like, oh, it's 2021 and then 2015. Like, there just a little bit of it is
I don't see any fucking robots coming out of the ocean and storming any beaches anywhere. I'm not seeing that. So, they have a smaller window because their future was 1997 and this one is 2015. So, obviously...
yeah, they
you haven't seen it because we prevented it.
I did see those Japanese robots dancing in like a gym or whatever. I think
I would also say Terminator holds up. Sorry, Jake, just to try to put a little English on it. Terminator holds up because they were right that we should have been terrified by all this. Now, Siri hasn't started giving us orders and robots haven't started kicking down our doors, but the idea of being very fearful of our technological future, I think, has held up very well.
I really am like anti-robot and afraid that robots will be our downfall. And people always laugh.
Are you on the record about that?
But I think it's because of this movie. I've always been like, fuck robots, bro. They're going to take over, man.
I think...
Not cool.
Yeah.
Scary.
I saw Leonard be very rude to a checkout computer once at a Target. It was uncalled for.
Never do self-checkout. I feel like, obviously, it's tough. It's a tougher position for Back to the Future because we live in 2021 now and we lived through 2015. But the Cubs did win the World Series. For a movie, a movie that came out when it did, I feel like there are movies that came out before and after that look way worse. way worse as far as the special effects. So I feel like that holds up. I feel like Back to the Future.
Is this one easier for you,
Are
Jake?
we basing it on?
It could be acting, the thought
froze.
process, the character, anything, special effects. It all falls under the same thing. PC.
Oh yeah, there's another. I don't think either of these movies are problematic really in any way, but I guess it's holds up can also mean like you wouldn't do this today. This is in bad taste or whatever.
Well,
Okay, I'll tell you.
holds up is Oh, go ahead, Leonard.
The one part where he goes back to his house and it's like Hill Valley is really shitty, and there's like abandoned cars everywhere, and he goes to his house and a black family lives in the house. It's like, oh well, now it's a shitty neighborhood. It's a black family.
Oh shit! I was wondering what the significance of that was.
There's a black family that lives there now because it's a bad part of town. But other than that, I mean, I guess it's true. They were right. It was the Reagan era, so it's probably correct. Anyways.
Also, the guy in the future who, like Griff, which is Biff's grandson, who hangs out with his own gang of knuckleheads, and one dude just has what looks like face paint circuit boards. I was like, this is awful, like, character design, and that doesn't hold up at all. Even in the time, I would have looked at that like, this is corny as fuck. But
Well, this category's got to be weird for this round, right? Because part of what we're assessing on holding up is the accuracy with which it portrays the future. Like, that is not, that almost wouldn't happen if one of you picked The Dark Knight. Like, these two movies are competing against each other in a very specific way. I will say that, like, they didn't get the future right in Back to the Future necessarily, but they did kind of demonstrate what would happen if a Trump-like figure took control, and there is kind of an insurrection happening all throughout town. So that one, I don't presume to think they had any. I think they were just making jokes. Where I think James Cameron, it gets overlooked a lot in Terminator 2 because he spends majority of the movie trying to sort of say like Sarah Connor might be mentally unstable, but she gives that speech when she's at the guy's house who she tries to assassinate, and she's basically like, men try and create, and this is what happens. It leads to death and destruction, and it comes from a place of jealousy because they can't do what women can do, and it's like kind of this profound sort of like feminist thing that is like unfortunately nestled right between her trying to murder a man and then a robot peeling his skin off in front of their family. So you don't really like, it doesn't hit with the same resonance, but I think it is kind of a cool, compelling thing of like, she's seen as this crazy person for saying like, look out, be careful of like what you're trying to do when you're trying to artificially create, and I don't necessarily have a stance on it, but I think that is like a cool thing that James Cameron then undermines himself by being like, she also might be a little nuts. Like, it's a weird thing. But I think, in my opinion, Terminator 2 holds up just from like, I'm constantly like, oh man, I can't. Every time I watch it, I'm like, I bet this time I go like, that looks fake. But when the foster mom has that dude stuck to the fridge or whatever, it's like, I can't. I'm like, I still am kind of like, I don't know how they did that.
Yeah.
My
only points.
Also, Doc knocking Marty's girlfriend out for most of the movie.
It was very fucked up. And just leaving her on the porch.
Doesn't hold up great. I didn't even have to mention that, but I'm glad I
will say
this. That category.
I wish they would have gotten a better. I mean, I guess it's just hard. Arnold Schwarzenegger's like body double. It was just very obvious when it wasn't him on the bike. It was like so blatantly obvious when it wasn't him or Edward Furlong on the bike. And it's like, I know you want these great shots, but it's just like, this is another dude for like 6 whole seconds that I can clearly tell isn't him. But I just forgot. Oh, the scene where she comes and tries to assassinate him just literally doesn't make any sense. If you're coming here to kill him and stop the whole thing from happening from the point, The robot wouldn't be there. Neither of the robots would be there. Like, what you're doing is basically there's no point to it at all. It's inevitable. It's gonna happen. So why are you trying to assassinate this man in front of his family? Like, I just don't get it. And then they blow up the place, but it still happens. Like, everything still gets created. So it's like,
you're making like the Bill and Ted argument where they're like, remember that we got to remind ourselves to hide a key, and then the key is there because it's like thinking about it made it happen because they did it later, and then they were able to like, yeah. I mean, that movie falls apart the moment you're sort of like, but wait a minute. If they succeeded, wouldn't this movie not exist? Like, like.
But you know what? I'll give Terminator holds up. Sure, we'll give it to her. Now, the most important question of the entire episode. Was Gary Oldman in either one of these films?
He was not. And I don't know exactly who he'd be in Terminator, because even though we usually like slotting them in, I don't want to take Robert Patrick's role away from him. I feel like that's the only place that would have made sense for a Gary Oldman, is to be
I feel like he could have worked in
T-1000.
the hospital, the mental hospital.
I was going to say, I think he could be her.
Yes.
He could be the doctor who's kind of like...
Dr. Licks? Dr. whatever.
Not that guy.
Oh, God. No. The head.
Well, he is a villainous guy, especially in the 90s.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a ton of lines. But the other doctor who's like, who interviews her and is like, now Sarah.
He for sure could have been.
Yeah.
I feel like
that's Gary Oldman. You're absolutely right.
Or he could have done another thing where he could have played someone of another nationality and been the Hispanic man, the guy in Mexico. He could have played the guy, but that would have been a very short role. But that's what he likes to do: come in for a quick little second and do something strange. So I don't know
who would he have been in Back to the Future.
Maybe Biff. I don't know. Maybe Biff or maybe his dad.
The movie is
but he's also young, so
you
it's
need
like
to put him into the first one to be.
He would have.
Oh, I got it. They recast Crispin Glover in this movie, and you can tell because there's one scene of him that's new footage, which is not Crispin Glover, and it's when the dad shows up and he's upside down, and it's like, this is wacky. Put Gary Oldman in that. that would be a really funny recast. You don't have Crispin Glover anyway.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I don't know. Obviously, because he also would have been super young, he wouldn't really have fit in Back to the Future.
Well, Crispin Glover was young. They just put old man makeup on him.
I'm just thinking, like, if he's in the second one.
How young would he have been?
If he's in the second one,
in his late 20s,
he had to
early
be in
30s.
the first one, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I don't know if he would have been in the.
That's why I think Crispin Glover refusing to do the sequel. What was the reason for that again? Was he just wanted more money, or he was just a space cadet and they were like,
he wanted more money.
Yeah, that's why they have his dad dead, conveniently dead for a lot of the movie too.
And I guess he sued them over it, and SAG had to change their likeness, like the way they do likenesses in movies.
Because he's not the only one. Marty's girlfriend changes too, which that's the really tough one to pull off. Because the movie literally ends with them hopping in Doc Brown's car, and they just recast. Did you not realize that, Leonard?
I did not. Wow.
I was about to say you had like. White lady face blindness. You didn't realize
like,
that.
I didn't realize it.
They recast. I think that's why they knock her out too. They're like, less time with this character. People will realize.
Yeah.
They got Leah Thompson back.
Okay.
No, Leah Thompson is his.
Yeah, they say you got.
That's what I mean. They got her back. She's very available. Yeah,
but they got what's her name? Jennifer is like a Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah, Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
his girlfriend is.
She's different from the first one.
Yeah.
Oh man, the boys. Love it. Now it's
most recently from the boys.
This is I feel like a heavyweight matchup again for as far as stats. I'll go ahead and start out with what's that? Go ahead.
They're going to match up because this is 89 to 91. So the box office essentially we don't have to do much inflation here.
The box office for Back to the Future 2 is $336 million. That's a lot of money in 1989.
Yeah.
The IMDb
off a $40 million budget.
$40 million budget. IMDb 7.
It was only
only 40 mil. That's kind of surprising.
You just superimpose the car flying. There's not a ton of that's it feels like part of maybe it was budgetary why they never actually they ditched the future after the first act of the movie.
I heard that they didn't want to do the future because they knew they were going to get it wrong and it would be scrutinized later. So that's why they like kept it short.
That makes sense.
I can see that.
IMDb 7.8, Rotten Tomatoes 66%, 94% with Google users. So the people like it, but
Leonard loves the Google users.
Not as much. The critics didn't like it on Rotten Tomatoes, but you know what? Fuck the critics. Anyways, what are your numbers for Terminator 2, or do you want me to put them out there for you?
I got them here. Terminator 2 was made for about $100 million. It's estimated between 94 and 102, so that's a higher budget, but it made $520 million. So huge return and $500 million bucks. Pretty good. Let's see so I had those stats pulled up. Let me check. IMDb has it at a 8.5. That is a strong
That's
IMDb
really
score.
high for IMDb, I feel like.
Yeah, that's in its top 250 movies or whatever they do. And Rotten Tomatoes, 93%.
93%.
Yeah. I don't... You
Wow,
want
it
the
has a
Google users,
93%
Leonard?
from the critics. It has a 94 from the audience.
95%. 95 from
mine says
Google
94.
users. Leonard loves Google
Oh,
users.
for Google users. Yeah, I love Google users because they like my shitty movies. So with Back to the Future 2, though, the critics rating is 66%. The audience rating is 84%, which is still lower than the audience rating for 94% for Terminator 2. Yeah, people really love Terminator 2. Rewatching it again, I didn't feel like the same, like I wasn't as enamored or like had that same spirit I felt like I used to have when it's been a while since I watched it, but it's still a good movie. But I also had just watched Judas and the Black Messiah, and then I watched this like right after that. And I think I just hated white people for about 12 hours after watching that movie. So I don't know if I was.
Feels like we got off light.
What about white robots?
Especially white robots. No, but yeah. I mean, I feel like Terminator 2 is the better movie here, obviously, and the stats show that. So I can't really argue against that. I mean, was James Cameron nominated for anything? Was Terminator 2 nominated for anything as far as awards?
I'm sure the effects.
It won. I think it's like one of the only sequels to win Academy Awards, but it's all effect stuff. Like
Yeah, I can't imagine any acting or certainly not Best Picture. But yeah, I can check that.
It won 4 Oscars.
Wow.
Best sound, best effects.
Yeah, and the effects in Back to the Future are good. The DeLorean, kind of gliding through the sky looks good. I don't know that I think the thing about Back to the Future's effects is that they're really fun and creative. I still love like the tires as the car blasts into the future. It like leaves a fiery trail and stuff. But that's not like whoa. Like the Terminator 2 special effects with the liquid metal and all that stuff is like he was redefining.
Exactly.
Special effects.
They're very different movies.
Jurassic Park came out and
one was like this is about special effects and what show you what we can do and robots in the future. And the other one's like we're having a good time. The whole fam's about to have fun. It's very
he was
different,
flexing.
Very different movies. So, but
right.
that leads.
Does that bring us to closing arguments, Leonard?
Leads to our closing arguments. Which one is the best sequel? Quinn, do you want to go first or second?
I don't know. I
feel like
the order hasn't been helping me much. Yeah. Well, you go first. Give me the second because I'm the one who has to fight for my pick. It means nothing if you lose.
I can't. It's hard for me to really argue against Terminator 2 because honestly, I probably would have chosen it, but Quinn chose it before me. So I mean, it was. I told him that.
I rest my case.
But I still didn't choose it. I still hadn't come down to the decision. So he chose it, and I was like, all right, cool, you can have it. And rewatching it, it was fun, but it's kind of just like boring in a sense where it's just like one note of them following, and it's like they kind of had to add stuff to it. Like, all right, well, let's go blow up this thing and try to kill this black dude to make it have some point to this movie and and make it a story. Because it just is like I don't understand it. I'm not going to attack it anymore. But Back to the Future is what I want, and I feel like what people want in a sequel. It's not like, all right, let's try to write this great movie. It's like, this first one hit, it was fun, people loved it, let's do it again. And they did it like, you know, it didn't take there wasn't much of a gap in between time for these movies. The movie ends and the movie starts right where it left off from the other one, and you're on the same fun ride, and it doesn't get old because they tweak it, but they bring you back and give you the nostalgic, like, oh, I know that. Oh, I like that. Oh, looking at it from this angle. And they knew what they were doing coming into this. They knew they were like, we're just going to have fun. We're making this. I feel like it's just the true sequel. Like, this is what this was. Here it is again, but better. And I feel like they didn't disappoint. I feel like maybe I can't say that the second one is better than the first one. I don't know if I can say that. And I feel like when I was just looking at the stats that people liked the first one better. But the first one was so good that they just didn't fuck that up. They stuck with the same plan, and I felt like they executed it well. They didn't do a disservice to the first one, and you still can celebrate the first one in the second one, but it's still a different story just a bit. Like, the first one has more heart, and I feel like it's a better story, but it's hard to recreate that over and over again. And for a sequel, I don't think it disappointed, and I think they did a great job. And I feel like people to this day will fight you over this movie, and they love this movie, and it holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. And even though maybe it may not be better than the first one, people still like the second one better of the three movies. And it's just a good feeling. So that's me. That's my argument for best sequel for Back to the Future 2, Part 2. Quinn, here comes your analytical response. Break it down for me, baby.
I'm not trying to think of what else I need to say when Leonard said he would have picked Terminator 2 had I not beaten him to it.
I may have, yeah.
I'll give a shout out to, I wanted to mention this, but there was no organic spot, but shout out to Michael Peter Balzeri, better known as Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, for playing Needles, the character that gets Michael J. Fox fired in the future, which is like, whatever comes of that, nothing. Yeah. Anyway,
I forgot about this. I just want to mention one thing. Billy Zane has been in the episode two. He's been in the two episodes in a row. He's one of those dudes trying to beat up Marty McFly in the past. I was like, is that Billy Zane? And it is.
The three guys he's also in the future. The three guys who spend their entire, or in the re-future 80 whatever, the 80s. He's got the cowboy hat. He's one of those guys who spends their whole life just being Biff's sidekick.
Oh, that's him. Oh, it's the same three guys. Okay, I didn't realize that.
The same three guys.
Cool. All right, sorry. I'm sorry.
He's not Circuit Face, but he's one of Biff's group. So Jake is our judge, and Jake is going to make this decision based on what he feels, and that's fine. And I'm thinking, and Jake tipped his hand a little bit earlier where he said, if I'm thinking of the best sequel, I'm thinking Back to the Future. If I'm thinking of the better movie, I'm thinking Terminator 2. And that's interesting because I think the better movie would be the best sequel. The highest honor that a sequel can achieve. Because what do you think when you go in, and I'm saying generally now, Jake, not just to you, but what do you think when you go into a movie? If I go to see Spider-Man 2 and I'm like, this will just be Spider-Man, or it'll be, different Spider-Man, and it's going to fight Doc Ock instead of the Green Goblin, but it's not going to be better. Why do it? Why do we go to see sequels? We want to see the same people, the same characters, the same filmmaker, whatever, but we want them to give us something more and hopefully something better. Otherwise, I would not pay to see a movie if I kind of went in knowing this won't be as good. So that's just off the top of my head why I think the better film should be considered for the better sequel. I would also say that, we've been over it. I mean, James Cameron took a kind of a movie that was a knockoff of 80s slasher flicks, and he made it this whole expansive universe thing. So much so, in fact, that kind of like J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter books, you kind of have to go back and rethread the needle and be like, okay, yeah, well, there's a time turner, but not everyone can go back in time. And there's these issues that came because the sequel was so good that people are like, well, now there's a mythology to it. This isn't just a robot time travel movie from the 80s. I mean, I want to know more about this, and I want to know more about the future of man and all these awful additional Terminator sequels that are bad. if I go something else against Back to the Future, I don't think I think people can enjoy it for the future stuff. I don't think most people consider it better than the first. Certainly, we just went over the stats. It's not rated more highly than the first with fans or with critics. Terminator 2 is, and Back to the Future was, Leonard, I think you said you envisioned it as like a one-off sequel. It was not. They waited 4 years after the first. They filmed 2 and 3 back to back, I'm pretty sure.
They did.
And so it's a bit of a cheat. And it's not a cheat. It's definitely a sequel, but it's a bit of a cheat in the sense of like, I used the Matrix Reloaded for an earlier episode this season.
Oh.
I did, which I won that episode, believe it or not, because
it was up against Street
but
Fighter. Which
it was up
the
against Street
guest
Fighter,
liked
but-
the movie better, but didn't, because he liked it better, he didn't choose it. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, thank you for not having me on that episode.
But the point of that one was, it's a sequel, but it's part 2 of 3. And I just think, like, if we're talking about sequels, I mean, it's like, why didn't I choose The Empire Strikes Back? I mean, it's a sequel, but it's also a gateway movie. There's a third one coming, which will resolve everything. The thing about Terminator 2 is no one really knew to expect it. I guess if you read the trades and you see that James Cameron's doing another robot movie, then you knew to expect it. But narratively, it was not necessary. And then it comes, and it's so much better than the third one, and then it ends again. I mean, it's a sequel that really reimagines, puts on steroids its original, and just makes a better film. I think pop culturally, I know we were gridlocked on that, but I think it is more resonant. We know it holds up better, and we know the box office is better. If we're talking about the best sequel, I just feel like you have to give it to Terminator 2, and I say that fully acknowledging Back to the Future Part 2 is a ton of fun. It gives you what you want from a Back to the Future sequel, but it does not reinvent the wheel, and it does not improve upon the original. I would still rather
Which is why
watch
it's
the
the
original.
best sequel.
And I cannot...
Which
No.
is why it's the best sequel.
So,
yours might be the better
the best
movie,
sequel-
but mine is the best sequel because it knew what it was.
There exist out there sequels that improve upon the original. That's the stated goal of any sequel, and if it's not, I don't know
But
why
like
you're
you
making
just
it.
said, nobody was looking for Terminator 2. Nobody was looking for Judgment Day. People were like, "Oh, when's that Back to the Future 2? When's that Back to the Future 3 coming?" It knows what it is. The best sequel.
Well, to that point, they gave people something that they didn't know they wanted, and they loved it so much more than the original. So
All right. Okay. Jake, tell us how you feel about.
I don't know how you guys do this. This is so stressful. It
Oh.
takes the thing I like to do the most,
Jake,
and then
the first
it's
season-
like
makes it
The
awful.
first season, we didn't have a judge. One of us had to give up first. And whoever
Yeah, so
gave up
the-
first-
Jesus Christ.
every episode was 6 hours long, and it would go until one person's laptop died.
Holy shit. All right. Fuck. It's so hard because even in listening to your guys' arguments, it was like, and I hate when arguments come down to sort of like semantics, but it was like both of you were pretty much arguing that like Back to the Future Part 2 is a sequel. It sets out to be a sequel, but Terminator 2 is probably a more fun time. And if it's a sequel, then it's a better, more fun time. Like and also I think I think it's hilarious that we do the Oscars and go like, we've decided this is the best movie of the year, and it's like, what? Who? Shouldn't that be impossible to objectively decide something? Because it's like, I think, man, I don't know.
If you're truly torn, Jake, I would just remind you that I have to do a punishment. If you're truly 50-50.
Hold on, Quinn.
Well, no, here's... yes,
Oh,
Leonard.
no, I was just telling Quinn to stop talking, basically.
I'm just saying, if he's deadlocked
man.
and he wants to push it one way or the other, one of us
I'll
has
say
to do
this.
something
If
worse.
You can watch Terminator 2 and be like, holy shit, this movie's good. You don't need to watch the first one. And there are probably a lot of people who saw Terminator
Yeah.
2 who never saw the first
Yeah.
one. That doesn't make it a
Yeah.
better sequel. You need to see the
Yes, it
first one
does.
to see the second one because it's a two-part storyline. It's a two-part story that makes sense.
It's a three-part story.
Three-part story. You don't need to watch the third one, but you need... You guess you do.
So
if
you
watch.
dictate which ones you need to watch.
Yeah. Anyways,
The third, it ends with Doc Brown maybe dead or
no,
living in the past.
He finds his love, and what he wanted the whole time was the woman he loved, and she just happened to live in the 1800s. Anyways, I'm sorry. Jake is still thinking. I'll let him process this.
I'll wrap this up.
I know he's thinking. I'm
just
trying to influence him.
I'm like, well, both of you thought about picking The Dark Knight, which you definitely don't need to see Batman Begins.
Correct.
But that's not really fair because neither of you picked The Dark Knight. But I'm trying to go and mostly I'll just spend time agonizing over this after this podcast is over, thinking about what I think makes a good sequel. I think, I think because ultimately, I will go see, I like the genre of, action movies, and I'll just go see an action movie. But and I assume you've done things where it's what's the best romantic comedy or something like that. So, if I start examining it from that perspective, I don't go to see a movie just because it's a sequel. But I will just go see a lousy action movie. So, which is the best sequel, I think, has got to be the movie that I watch more, which has got to be Terminator 2.
Oh, thank God. Drive the stake through your heart, Leonard.
I wanted that 10-8 10 wins to your 8 wins, but now we're tied at 9 wins apiece over 2 seasons. Season
thank
5-4
Thank
Quinn.
you, Jake.
Season
I
2,
appreciate it.
Sorry for that.
5-4 me.
Sorry for that.
It's okay. Quinn will now be watching one of the 3 films.
House of Sand and Fog.
You're choosing A House of Sand and Fog?
I don't know. I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm going to watch one of them.
Have you seen Twilight?
It feels like from my girlfriend through osmosis, but no, I've never sat down and watched Twilight. Maybe that'd be more fun.
That's cool, though, because I maybe will rewatch it, even though it's super depressing. I want to watch the other ones.
Jake, I think you made good points on Leonard. I did not expect you to fully cop to Back to the Future 2 being worse than the original, which was going to be my whole thing there. So I was sweating that out a little bit, clearly, as Jake was. Everything you said, for everyone who's listening to this, you can't see us on the Zoom, but everything Jake said was well, but I go to see these, and then Leonard and I would be and then he'd say something else, and one of us would rise and one of us would fall.
Yeah, I really had to walk myself through that.
That's okay. You take sequels very seriously, and I think you came to the correct
it's
decision.
okay. You know what? Because I still won the fucking season, and that's all that matters. Jake,
good. I am glad.
It was
now, Jake, which of us is the better improviser? No,
deadlocked.
It was a blast having you on. Thank you so much, Jake. Where can we?
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you for
where
having
can we
me.
find you?
You can. I think it's easiest to just Google Jake Jabbour at this point. But twitch.tv/WeImprov. You can catch shows there. You can see both Leonard and Quinn live Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Or you can just go to twitch.tv/WeImprov and watch all the Wii videos you like. I am... if people are interested in this at all, I'm doing a Substack, and one of them is on time traveling sequels.
Ooh, okay.
Wow.
That was in part inspired by, I was writing about sequels that worked, and then you guys had me thinking about this one. I was I should probably be more specific. But there's also stuff about Die Hard on there and things like that. So, but if you Google Jake Jabbour or Jake Jabbour Substack,
nice. It's so nice, man. Y'all got those names that no one else has.
Yeah, you can follow Jake on Twitter also at Wake Up with Jacob. I'll throw a
that's right.
And
Thank
definitely heartily support We Improv classes and shows. It's a ton of fun, and certainly in quarantine, a interesting and diverting way to make up these endless hours that we all have in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Or talking about movies. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much, Jake. I'm feeling slightly. I had lost 2 in a row to end the season. Before this one to end the season, and it feels good to get back on the winning track. So I'm going to take my punishment like a man. I'm going to watch House of Sand and Fog or Twilight or A Walk to Remember, and come back for season 3 ready to reclaim my throne. I think.
Reclaim it.
Anything
It's
else,
my
Leonard?
throne right now. And
Well, but I'll reclaim the throne.
you won't. Anyways, it's been a blast, guys. It's a great season. You know, we're gonna do the punishment episode. Obviously, we're gonna do.
You'll have some awards to give out
the
to. I
awards
think.
episode as always, and it's gonna be fun.
Jake, really, really quick, and if you don't have an answer, we're just gonna go. But did you have if you had picked for this category? I feel like I should ask because you're writing a book about it. Do you have a favorite sequel, hands down, or is it a debate in your mind?
Yeah, but it's a hot take, which is I like Blade Runner 2049.
Okay.
Whoa, that is a hot take.
Okay.
It's my favorite sequel.
Oh, we have to talk to you about that off air, or talk to you about that sometime in the future. That is very interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
My only problem with Blade Runner 2049 is I couldn't get Harrison Ford to not wear his gray T-shirt. Harrison Ford was at the fuck it stage of his career. He's just like, I'm gonna wardrobe myself, and they're like, everyone else is wearing sleek future clothes, and he's like, this is a Hanes T-shirt, and I'm gonna wear it.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point.
It doesn't take away, but a little bit I noticed it. But until that time, thank you again, Jake. Thank you, Leonard, for a well-fought season. And until then, we will see you at the cinema.
I won.